Hi everybody, Dan Pilla here, tax litigation consultant and author of 15 books on successful methods of dealing with the IRS, including my latest book, The Small Business Tax Guide. In this video today, we're going to talk about avoiding IRS penalties for failure to file and failure to make deposits. I'm going to show you how to set up your withholding system properly. If you're self-employed, I'm going to walk you through what you need to do to make sure that you don't get clobbered with estimated tax payments. And I want you to stick with me all the way to the end, friends, because then I'm going to show you how to get your tax refund in your paycheck every single month. So let's get started. In 2019, the IRS issued over 40 million penalties against individuals and businesses. Now, friends, there was only about 152 or 153 million tax returns filed in 2019. So we're talking about almost 25% of the people out there getting clobbered with a penalty. 75% of these penalties were for failure to pay the taxes and failure to make proper deposits. So what's going on here? What's happening is people do not understand how our withholding system works. For those of you that are wage earners working for a paycheck for an employer someplace, you're a W-2 wage earner, you get the taxes taken out of your paycheck. And for those folks that are self-employed, they're just not making their estimated payments properly and on time. So let's talk about what you need to do to keep your arms around this situation. People use their W-4 form in the wrong way. Now, the W-4 form is called the Employees Allowance Certificate. The problem is that employees misuse their Form W-4, the Employees Withholding Certificate. I have one right here in front of me. You submit the W-4 when you start a new job, and for most people, this is a file and forget situation. And what I mean by that is you show up at your new job one day, you file your W-4 form with your employer, you submit it to the employer, and then you forget about it. Now, you got to keep in mind, friends, that the W-4 form is the way that you communicate to your employer what your withholding needs to be. All right, and so you have got to adjust that W-4 form to correctly cover your tax liability. People file it and then they forget it. Now, what happens in many cases is people end up overpaying their taxes. They pay too much. In 2019, the average tax refund was about $3,500. That means the typical taxpayer overpaid their taxes by about $300 a month, month in and month out. We're going to show you how to fix that problem later on in this video if you stick with me. But what you need to understand, friends, is the W-4 form is not a file and forget form. That form is a living document, meaning that you need to change that form as your life's circumstances change, because everything that happens in your life, and this is one of the diabolical things about the federal income tax law, frankly, in my opinion. This is another subject for another day, but the fact of the matter is the federal income tax affects every single person based on their lifestyle changes. For example, if you get married or divorced, your tax situation changes. If you start a business or close up a business, if you buy a house or sell a house, if you have a new baby in the tax year, or an older child moves out of your house and is no longer a dependent, if you start an IRA or you start taking distributions from an IRA. All of these are significant life events, friends, that have a direct impact on your tax liability, and these things need to be taken into account for purposes of wage withholding, and they need to be taken into consideration by self-employed people when they're figuring their estimated taxes on a quarterly basis. So these are the things that we need to keep in mind. Now, here's the other thing I want you to remember. There's no law that requires you to overpay your taxes. All right, you do not have to overpay your taxes. You have to follow the 90%, 100% rule. And this is the key to avoiding failure to file penalties and failure to deposit penalties. Follow the 90%, 100% rule. And here's how that works. And let's just use 2001 as our example now, because we're in tax year 2001. And this is the point in time, early January, mid-January, when you want to address this situation and get it under control. Under the 90%, 100% rule, you have to pay 90% of the current year's taxes. That would be 2021, that's the year we're in now, or 100% of your last year's tax liability, which would be 2020. Whichever's less. Remember, you don't have to overpay your taxes. 90% of the current year's liability or 100% of last year's liability, whichever's less, is what you have to pay through estimated payments. Employees do that through wage withholding. Self-employed people do that through periodic estimated payments. All right, now, So what that means, friends, is you've got to look at your financial situation at the end of the year, look at your 2020 full year, 2020 income and expense situation, and going into 2021, make sure that you meet that 90% or 100% rule. So let's just say, for example, your 2020 tax liability was $5,000, and you don't expect there's going to be any changes to your financial circumstances or life circumstances in 2021. If that's the case, if you pay $5,000 through wage withholding or estimated payments, you're going to avoid penalties. Now, if your circumstances have changed and you think your income is going to go up by 20%, then bump the $5,000 by 20%. If you think your situation is going to go down, then bump the $5,000 downward based on the circumstances that you project. Now, understand, friends, this is not an exact science, all right? So this is why it's very important to understand that your wage withholding and your estimated payments is a dynamic situation that has to be evaluated on an ongoing basis. W-4 is not file and forget, and your estimated payments for self-employed people have to be looked at on at least a quarterly basis. Now, I think you should do it a little more often than that, but at least quarterly, you've got to evaluate your situation with an accurate profit and loss statement, and then make those estimated payments based on the current circumstances that are going on right now. All right, now, okay, so what we're going to do now is, once we understand what this withholding situation is, once you understand what your responsibility is for wage withholding, for you wage earners, you don't want to get a tax refund, friends. Now, the people tell me all the time, well, Dan, it's a great way for me to save money. No, it's not. It's the world's worst way to save money. And the reason is because, again, if you're the typical taxpayer with a $3,500 tax refund, that means you paid $300 a month to the IRS, month in and month out, in taxes that you don't owe. And to make matters worse, you don't get your money back at the end of the year. You don't get your money back until you file your tax return in March or April of the next year, which means there's 14 or 15 months worth of withholding on your paycheck before you get any money back. And then to top that all off, you don't get a nickel's worth of interest on the money that the IRS holds from you. It's not a good way to save money, friends. You're better off taking that money in your paycheck every month. And the way you do that is you adjust your withholding to match your tax liability. People say, Dan, well, if I don't get a big refund, I don't want to owe the IRS any money either. And you're right, you don't. But this is not an either-or situation. Either get a big refund or owe the IRS a bunch of money. When you pay attention to your withholding and your estimated payments and the circumstances of your life, you can adjust your withholding to match your tax liability, so that when you file your tax return at the end of the year, they don't owe you a bunch of money and you don't owe them a bunch of money. In the meantime, you've gotten your tax refund in your paycheck every single month. It's like a tax-free raise, and you don't have to work overtime to get it. Now you got $300 a month you can put in a retirement plan, IRA or 401k, and collect interest every day the money's in the account. Or you got $300 you can use to pay necessary living expenses. We got about 2/3 of the people in America that are living paycheck to paycheck, and yet they got a tax refund coming from the IRS. That's silly. Friends, use your money to enhance your living circumstances. Pay your bills, get out of debt, start a retirement account. Anything is better than letting the IRS hold your money for up to 14, 15 months without paying you a nickel's worth of interest. When you follow these simple steps that I've outlined here in this video, you're going to save money, because you're not going to be letting the IRS hold your money interest-free. You're going to build a savings account, and just as importantly, friends, you're going to avoid the failure to file penalty and the failure to deposit penalty that clobbers millions of people every year. Okay, friends, if you got any questions about any of this that we've discussed in this video, or frankly, any questions about any kind of tax enforcement problem, just drop a comment in the comment sections below here and we'll respond to you. You can also go to my website, TaxHelpOnline.com. We've got all kinds of resources on the website, including my books and my latest book, Dan Pilla's Small Business Tax Guide, all available on my website, TaxHelpOnline.com. That's TaxHelpOnline.com.